Blueprint for Change. A plan to overcome challenges. Blueprint for Change. A guide to help create opportunities. Blueprint for Change. Thought-provoking conversations. Blueprint for Change. Why wait when you can contribute to the Blueprint for Change?
Good evening, Bahamas. This is Blueprint for Change, the show designed to change your perspective on how you think about national issues. We want to help you discover your blueprint for change. Blueprint for Change is sponsored by Michael Diggiss and Associates. I am the co-host, Dale Happy Knowles, and our host, Michael Diggiss, is in the background. He's having a little technical difficulties, but he will join us shortly, even though he's online. Dev Enterprises, my company, is grateful for being here once again. And so we look forward to a very informative conversation with our guests this evening. And we ask you, our listeners, should you want, you can place a message, a question or suggestion on our Facebook page, Blueprint for Change Show, where we will then endeavor to address during the show or after as we can. Tonight, we will continue our discussion with Monte A. Pratt, who is a driven architect, development planner, and construction manager. He's been in operations for over 50 years, so that's a wealth of experience, and he can teach the oldest man in the world how to do things right. So we'd like to welcome Monte. Monte?
Good evening, Bahamas. Good evening, Dale.
Good evening. We'd also like to welcome our host, Michael Diggiss. Are you on, Mike?
I think I am on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, we can.
Okay.
Great. Awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Happy. Thank you very much for taking charge of the show last week. And I understand from all comments that you did a wonderful job. So I know we're in good hands.
Great. So today, as we continue the discussion on the mindset necessary for the new built environment, we pose 3 questions on the Facebook page that we will put to the Honorable Monte Pratt. The questions are, what can be done to increase the private sector's risk tolerance in the new built environment? The second question is, how would you restructure our economic model for the new built environment for success? And the third question is, would embracing the Washington Blueprint model catapult our political, economic, and social environment for the people's benefit? And that Washington environment we will speak of in depth today, which is the Washington Airport Authority's development program that you had the pleasure of being a significant player all the way from the Bahamas up there in Washington. So just to start us off, if we are aware of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the operations of the business of casinos in Freeport and Grand Bahama and Freeport and Nassau in 1967, that commission exposed a number of irregular activities that put funds in the hands of persons who would have been in governance at the time. But we don't want to focus on the persons, but the fact that funds was put in their hands of a significant amount of money. We also know that in the Tribune in 2015, there was an article listed where there was suggested by one of the banks, overseas banks, that there's some $7 billion worth of assets sitting in banks overseas that is registered to Bahamian passport holders. Now, that could be, from my understanding, an individual or a company that is registered in the Bahamas, so which could also be a foreign company registered in the Bahamas. And we also like to consider the fact that the Bahamas Evolution recently presented on natural resources that suggested that the markup from what the government sells the natural resources mined out of the sea compared to when it gets to the actual retail market could be a maximum of 7,000. So the reference for all of those is to show that if we have a multiplier effect of even say 3,000, and the present value of $1 million from back in 1967 would be $7,800,000, we could very well see that the 7 billion might not be far-fetched, even though we doubt that's the actual real number. So we asked this question in terms of our private sector, Monty, that we seem to be very risk adverse, and the foreign direct investors seem to have more development going on in the Bahamas than our domestic developers who have capital access, or who have access to capital. So we asked the first question: what can be done to increase the private sector's risk tolerance in the new built environment to help them remove the mindset of being risk adverse?
Well, Dale, there's been a lot of chat on social media and otherwise and talk shows with respect to the natural resources of the Bahamas, right? And a lot of numbers and figures are being thrown around with respect to the value of the end market value. But what is not being discussed is the challenges of mining those resources, which is takes substantial equipment and monies to do. So I believe that the Bahamas government must seek a private partnership with professional foreign enterprises that have the resources in terms of equipment and the knowledge how to do this. It is a lot of talk, and a lot of people don't understand the depth of what goes into extracting aragonite and sand and limestone, which we have in abundance. But to answer your question, I believe what needs to happen is there needs to be an overall restructuring of the system of government. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people who are saying, we should become a republic, because once we become a republic, we could do this and we could that, but that's not necessarily so.
Right, but Monty, before you go down that road, because we want you to get to that shortly. But the question that I'm asking is the mindset of the private sector today that has capital. Why are they risk adverse? Is it?
Well, I think it's a matter of probably education in terms of causing the private sector to better understand what is involved, and I am referring particularly to the construction and development industry with respect to the new built environment. There are other areas you touch on, finance and other areas of business, right? Mm-hmm. So, like I said, my area of focus is on what needs to happen with the development, the physical development of the Bahamas. One of the things, I produced a national development plan summary overview, and what is happening now, and maybe the private sector don't understand it, and maybe government don't understand it, but right now, the Bahamas no longer can be managed as one big single territory. We need to really restructure the geopolitical structure of the Bahamas. And in my national plan, what I propose is to establish 5 economic zones. And these economic zones will act as the foundation to get the private sector involved and to better understand how they can participate and lessen the risk in terms of micromanagement instead of the macromanagement by central government. So the private sector would have a more hands-on role with respect to development in these what I call regional provinces. And the idea behind it is, for example, to have one or two anchor projects that could be totally foreign investment, or it could be joint venture between local business and foreign, or it could be a public-private partnership with the government. And case an example, one of the zones that I have is the southern zone, which we refer to now as MICA. And everybody knows that MWAA is the key island with respect to its location. And I believe an anchor project that would help the private sector become involved would be the creation of a natural harbor and a proper runway that could serve as the same way we have it in the northern Freeport. It could be the foundation that would cause the southern Bahamas to take off with respect to access by these foreign investors who might want to come in. And one of the things is, for example, if you create a harbor, a man-made harbor, the base for making cement is limestone. So to create a cement factory or plant, as it was in the early days of Freeport, that could be a model that could be had, and it could be a joint venture, a private partnership between the government and the private sector. But one of the things that would do, that would cost the production of cement locally. And as you know, the type of construction that we do, we use a lot of cement. The other area that would benefit us, we need to build a lot of seawalls to mitigate against climate, global warming, and all of that. So yeah. That's an example of
okay, so
areas that we could deal with, you know.
Yeah. So in your 5 zones, they will be. Well, my preference would be that they would be some sort of imagery of the Grand Bahama Port Authority model, save without the private members owning the process, but it'd be more of an based on a tiered governmental structure. So is that similar to what you were thinking with your 5 zones?
That's pretty much what I have. That's pretty much what I have in mind. You know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at the Hawksbill Creek Agreement and tweak it to these respective provinces. Mm-hmm. And then cause there to be more participation of the residents and the people who and one of the things a plan like that would cost, it would cost the transition of a lot of people out of New Province into these new zones, because there would be opportunities that would be created, right? Another example of what I propose in my paper is PPL the Bahamas has outgrown BPL. And this same model of creating, it's actually 6 zones because it is 5 family island zones, and then New Providence is a zone by itself, right? So what I recommend in this paper that I wrote and posted on my LinkedIn page was the breaking up of PPL as was done, and I don't know if you remember when Marbell was broken up by the United States government, and they created 7 smaller telephone companies, and now today those 7 smaller companies are just as big as Marbell. So the point that I'm making is PPL cannot manage the Bahamas needs in terms of energy and generation of power. And what needs to happen is the government needs to form an authority like IRCA or even enhanced IRCA that would be the overseer. And then BPL should then be confined to New Providence and Paradise Island, and then the 5 new zones should create opportunities for 5 new power companies.
Right.
And we saw what happened when the media, television, media, and radio was privatized. Today we have some, I think, 40 radio stations in the Bahamas and 4 major television stations. So, and it's a substantial, this industry now hires a substantial amount of payments, but not only that, it costs other businesses spin off in terms of marketing and advertising. And so this is what will happen if we took these zones, these provinces, and we could then offer a power company for each respective zone that would be responsible. So in the case of Michael, a power company would be responsible for the
region.
That region, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it would open up a lot, and then these companies could then be traded on they could be private, public with government, and or they could be traded on the BISEX that would allow Bahamians to, similar to what was done with the harbor, with the port, the Arawak port, you know, and like I said, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, you know?
Right.
So,
And some of those, sorry, Mike, before you go, and some of those projects could actually break down even further, because we know that investors like certainty of the environment, and they also they would bring competition with multiple zones, which bring excellence. So go ahead, Mike.
So
just kind of picking up from the thought process that Monte is evolving, which is rather fascinating. But I wonder, Monte, should we not extend your economic zones around what I call economic pillars? So you mentioned the marijuana thing, and to me, when you said that, it seems like transportation becomes a key component. You mentioned BPL. It seems like energy is another one of those pillars. And then we were talking about the natural resources like aragonite and all of the materials we use in construction. Can they not become the pillars around which these economic zones are developed?
Yes, and I agree. A case in example, right? Let's look at energy. Let's say the government finds a public-private partner to build a LNG plant, power plant, and a regasification facility on Inagua, which is right on the main sea lane, where ships pass, hundreds of ships pass daily.
Right.
So, but here's the kicker. We could then sell electricity to Hispaniola, which is Haiti and Dominica. We could sell electricity to Turks and Caicos from that power plant, and we could sell electricity to southern Cuba. We could then do the same thing in the Northern Bahamas zone with Quisao, which is, you know, we have Quisao sitting out there, and we don't even think about it, right? But so between Florida and the Bahamas is the other major shipping zone where most of the ships come from, the Gulf of Mexico, the oil tankers and so forth and so on, but also the cruise ships. And we know all of these ships, because of the new environmental laws of the United States and Canada, these ships have to convert to clean energy and LNG. So if we then take that same model and put another power plant in the northern Bahamas, we could then sell electricity to northern Cuba. I don't know if Florida might be interested in buying power too, but more importantly, we could then take the same BTC model where we link the Bahamas with a loop for the internet system. We can then do the same thing with electricity. So you have a generation plant in the south and one in the north, and both of them eventually link island by island. And but here's the thing: we would then be able to probably produce per kilowatt around 12 cents, 11 cents, like Florida. We could then turn around and sell it to Haiti and Dominica and Turks and Caicos and Cuba for say 20, 25 cents. And the thing about it is, none of these countries that I name, Cuba, Haiti, Dominica, in Dominica their power goes off 4 hours every day, right? They cannot attract the investors and financing that the Bahamas could because of our political stability and being the third wealthiest country in the Western Hemisphere. We investors would come to the Bahamas to a mega project like that, but they ain't going to Haiti, where it's not politically stable. And of course, Cuba has the sanctions by the United States. So we could be looking beyond our borders in terms of exporting energy and making money. And basically, if we made money, we could probably then bring our energy costs down to 10 cents. And if we did that in the Bahamas, everybody know the key to development is energy in terms of Freeport would just bust wide open if we would be able to do that, you know?
Get the energy on the back. Yes.
Don't forget Monte sector, eh? Monte, you can't forget Happy, because, you know, telecommunications is the next one.
Yeah.
We had a model, you know, I could only say had because I'm not there anymore, so I can't say what's happening now. But if we follow those models that was being done over the 30 years that I was there and continue that in all of the economic zones with the different disciplines of business, then we would be bustling, and that 3 million people I talked about might be in to make the Bahamas a sustainable economy. Yeah. We will have that easy, right? And natural resources is one thing, but we still will be able to live way above the poverty line. I mean, every citizen by those things, because the whole idea what telecoms capitalized on was volume, and the volume wasn't Bahamian volume, the volume was foreign volume. Yes. And we've always capitalized on that. So we need to continue to do that. That's what we do with tourism. Tourism is foreign, right? So we're going to take a very short break, a very, very, very short one, Mr. Producer, Ali. And then we will go forward. So you have been listening to Blueprint for Change with host Michael Diggiss and Dale Happy Knowles. We'll be right back after this break. Ali gone? Okay. Anyway, we won't take the break then. So let's just go straight into the last.
Ali is not with us today.
Anyway, so
let's keep going.
Yes, we touched on that actually encompassed the question that we would have asked was how would we restructure the economic model in the new environment? So
I think we just did, right?
That's what I'm saying. So now we know that that Monte would have spent a significant amount of years, at least 4 or 5 years, I think it was, at the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority with their capital development program. Yes. And it was an equal opportunity program compliance officer and a business contract specialist. So if we break down one of those zones, Monty, and we now start applying, say, this model to it, and come up with a blueprint for each one that we could duplicate. Tell us how what you see of those models and your experience in Washington that could catapult the Bahamas to higher heights.
Okay, I work for the airport. I work with the airport authority on their capital development plan for both Ronald Reagan National and Dulles International airports. The program, which is started in 1985, and I think it's still going on today because it just keeps growing and growing with opportunities. I think out in Dulles now, they're now actually developing an aerotropolis, a city around the airport now, because there's so much land in that area and the growth. So it goes, they have done things like their own highways, underground system, but the federal program is mandated by the federal government, the Department of Transportation, and it not only applies to the airport, but it applies to any type of project that involves transportation. So you have airports, you have railway systems, you have harbors and highways, and so in these different transportation categories, there is legislation that makes it mandatory for participation of small and medium business enterprise, and we refer to them as SMBEs, right? So this is where the Equal Opportunity Program comes in to make sure that the program is carried out at the mandate of the Congress, because the both airports are really owned by Congress, and Dulles was built for diplomats coming into Washington, and Reagan National was built for congressmen who had to get back and forth from their different constituencies. But what happened, they grow into major airports, and when Congress couldn't handle them no more, they then had the Airport Authority form, which is solely for the airports are still owned by Congress, but they are run by the Airport Authority, and so they have an ongoing capital development plan where they expand the airports, anything to do with airports, runways, fuel farms, whatever you name, warehouses for freight and all that type of stuff. And now, like I said, in Dulles National, they're now building hotels and making a aerotropolis around Dulles Airport. So the point that I'm making is this program would be a key element of, should the government create a new model, which we would call the new the built-out environment. It could complement it, because what it actually does, it causes the money to trickle down right to the smaller companies, and not only like how we have it nowadays in the Bahamas, the big contractors get the big, contracts, and the smaller businesses get very little, and then it's hard for them to get into business. So what this program does, it really assists startup businesses and businesses that are considered disadvantaged businesses, and they have 5 particular categories, which they name specifically African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, and women. They are the 5 categories that are considered disadvantaged businesses. So in the program, what you get is sometimes you get set aside contracts that might be specifically for one of those particular areas. So for example, they might decide in a contract to set aside for the women program. So nobody else can bid on that contract except the women companies. And so this is the model. They also have a program that complements the Equal Opportunity program. It's called the Buddy System. And what the Buddy System is, it's a program designed for small startup businesses, young people who want to get into some business. And what it requires is the older established companies must hold these young entrepreneurs by the hand and give them a contract and bring them along the way, but not only with respect to giving them the contract, but training them in management, assisting them with getting insurance bond, and which is hard to get when you're a new company at the beginning, if you don't have a track record. And the other thing that is very interesting is any bank that has the Airport Authority funding in it. If a startup company goes to that bank or with a contract, it automatically can get 40% funding of their project, of their contract, just because of them having the Airport Authority. And so, for example, we hear a lot about the money that National Insurance have in the bank. So if the government was to implement a program like that, we can have a similar thing where when a person get a government contract, a disadvantaged business, they can then go to banks that have the surplus national insurance money, as startup money for their businesses, and this is how you grow the economy. So, but in addition to this, like Dale mentioned my position, I was a contract specialist and a business compliance officer. And what my job was to enforce the rules and the laws of the program. So, for example, if a contractor put in for a payment for a subcontractor, say for $50,000, but he only paid him $25,000 and he kept 25, that contractor could come to me and report the general contractor without worrying about repercussion. And I had the power to cost that general contractor to have the balance of that subcontractor money within 48 hours. So you can have the legislation, but you need to have the teeth to go behind it and to make it work. And so this is a model that can be easily adapted to the Bahamas system. And one of the things that I always say is, the truth is we really need to close down the engineering and construction and maintenance department of the Ministry of Works and farm that out to the private sector under a similar program, and just let the Ministry of Works be the regulator and the government entity that see that these things are done. And I think we'll be more effective as a country with respect to these types of projects and programs, you know.
Yeah,
But
so
Let me ask you,
also it can be applied in the private sector.
right. So just over time, though, Monty, how's that proven to be able to be sustainable?
Say that again.
Has that model proved to be sustainable over time?
Let me share a story with you. I went when I went to the Airport Authority. I think it was in 1992, 93, I think, and there was a Hispanic. You remember I said there are opportunities for women. There was a Hispanic lady, and what has happened in America is people are now specializing in specific areas. They're moving away from this general contractor type model that we still follow, which was a part of the British system that we inherit. And so what companies do, they specialize in one or two areas. And what this woman-owned company did was they specialized in masonry and block laying, right? And this lady started with the Airport Authority, and I think 4 or 5 years later when I left, she had a branch and what she did, she strategically located her branches where Hispanic men and workers were, in San Diego, in Miami, I think in somewhere in Texas, and so she started off with one company with a push from the Airport Authority, and she ended up owning 7 companies around the country. So eventually, she had to come out of the program because she was no longer disadvantaged business. So the idea is not for you to stay in the program. Once
Right.
what they do is they put a cap on you. So for example, they would say, okay, once your company makes over $7 million, you're
Yeah.
no longer disadvantaged business. So you got to go out there with the big boys now. And so
Right.
what it does is really a training program to grow businesses and grow the economy. That's what it's all about, you know?
So Monty, but how long has that Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority been in existence? You were there for 5 years, and how long before you?
I think if I can remember, they started in 1986. Like I said, the two airports are owned by Congress.
Yeah.
And what happened is the airport authority was a spin out of the FAA, right?
Yeah.
The people who came from who formed the initial airport authority were managers from the FAA. And you know, the FAA, their role is very strict because of what they do, right? And so the team that started the airport authority, they did in fact, I think the airport authority is one of the best run airport authorities in the world, not in the United States, right? I think between the two airports, they handle 42 million passengers a year, okay? And so they had a 60-year lease, and that 60-year lease has just been extended to a 99-year lease. And so the airport authority is a separate entity, and it is a quasi-government. They have their own police, they have their own fire department, and other areas, and the politicians don't get involved in it. Amazingly, I've been there for 4 years, and I never seen a politician come and cut a ribbon or come on a job site or anything like that yet, you know?
Yeah, so Monty, you know, DomDev Enterprises is all about making solutions that make companies more efficient and cost effective. So
Right.
if you look at this whole model that you put forward to us, you fit right in with our scope of things, because the government over the last at least 10 years in particular has been looking at entities within government to enable the people and the resources of the country. So we have stuff like the small business, the development company group or corporate, right? But my thing is this, we have models like VAT implementation, which has been highly successful in its implementation and in its collection, where the private sector does the government activity of collecting the tax for them. So
Right.
this what you're putting on the table is more of the same of that, but in a more granular state and mind. And I'm bewildered why the government does not go for more private sector, public partnerships.
You know, that's very interesting. One of the things that I point out, and I had a meeting with executives at the Port Authority in Freeport, and I said to them, the Airport Authority project in Washington and the Grand Bahama Port Authority is exactly the same model. The difference is, in Washington, they manage 2 airports. In Grand Bahama, they manage an airport and a harbor. So this model could be easily applied to the Grand Bahama Port Authority and with the support of government, and it would do amazing things to turn Freeport economy around. But I don't know how to get people to listen, you know?
All right, so Monty, what do you think was the impediment for that to happen?
Say that again?
What was the impediment? Why didn't it happen?
I really don't know, because I had meetings with the older executives who are now no longer with us, and I had meetings with current persons, and I don't know. I don't know if they just don't understand, but I mean, this is the Grand Bahama Port Authority it could be a pioneer model that could be used, and we tweak it, and then we could then apply that to the other 5 regions once we create those 5 regions. And it's so, to me, it's simple to do. But, you know, I don't know how we get the politicians and the leaders and people in charge to listen.
Right, because that comes to the heart of Monty's, of Happy's question. You know, what is preventing us from, you know, restructuring the economic model? We kind of discovered what some of the risk challenges may be, but you have a model through the Washington example that we could, you know, tweak, but yet there still seems to be some impediment for that to happen.
You
Are
know,
we missing something?
Interesting enough, you know, the government just released this new economic recovery report, and I really don't know who was on that committee, but what you need to do, you need to put people on those types of committees that could bring real-time solutions that would cause this to happen. So I don't know who was on that committee or whatever, but I didn't read the report. From what I heard, there's nothing substantial about the report. So what we discussing here tonight could be easily integrated into a report like that, you know?
Yeah,
And
so I think the challenge is that we are 3 creatives here, sitting talking. You're a planner, Mike is an architect, I'm an engineer, and we are on the front end of conception to design and the like and stuff. Whereas the persons who, from reading that lengthy list of persons who are on the committee and the subcommittees, you had some creatives like the Palm Burnsides and the like, but the majority of persons on there would have been dealing with the output side of systems and not necessarily the input. And I think that's part of our problem in this country. We don't look.
I didn't think. Yeah, happy to your point. I saw no engineers, no planners, you know, on that committee.
But that's what you begin with. You begin with your architectural engineering, construction. That's the root or the foundation for establishing and causing the economy to grow. And, you know, I look at a lot of, I listen to a lot of borrowing money and so forth and so on, but I hear no plans for these funding. And my thing is, I think right now the government should be able to borrow $1 billion with this lull. We can have a lull between 18 and 24 months before tourism get back to where it was. And then I think, again, we shouldn't focus solely on tourists. But that's what I want to say. We shut down. The construction industry was the only industry that really continued. And maybe agriculture to some degree, but banking shut down, tourism shut down, but construction was able to be sustained. And one of the arguments that I put out there is banking is not the second largest industry in the Bahamas. Construction is. When you look at I sent Dale a document, and in that document, if you look at the different sectors from planning right to completion, there is about 20 categories of business types, including building suppliers and so forth and so on, that make up the construction industry. So the construction industry hires about 3 times as much as the banking industry. But they, for some reason, consecutive governments don't recognize the construction industry as it is, construction and development. And because of the nature of the Bahamas being an archipelagic nation, where we need to build roads and bridges and seawalls and all of that, that is where we need to. So, like I said, they borrow $1 billion right now and put it into projects that would become beneficial to the country when tourism. So, for example, if they decided to build 5 small satellite cruise ports. Instead of these cruise ships going to private islands, you select 5 of your major islands and you build 5 cruise ports that could hold cruise ships. Carnival and MSC and all those big companies, they just apart. There are a lot of small companies that would come in here if they had the facilities to be able to dock. And so if you took the capital money and you put in 5 seaports that could hold 2 cruise ships on each major island, when tourism come back, the word will get out there that the Bahamas have 5 that's owned by government and not private, because a lot of the smaller companies, cruise companies, cannot afford to develop an island the way MSC and Coco Key was done by Royal Caribbean and those.
Right. So, but Monte, you take us right back to the beginning where we started, because the people who have that kind of capital in the Bahamas, and I'm stressing the Bahamian developers, right? Because we need to take control of our existence. As long as we continue, in my view, to always rely on FDIs, foreign direct investments, and a lot of these other things, then we're not going to be sustainable, right? And that's why I said
I agree.
I talk about the 3 million people in country for us to be sustainable on one of the courses I went on some good number of years ago. But it's the persons who have these exorbitant amounts of capital or disposable income that they can put towards these things. Some of these people are in shipping. Some of these people are in the areas already, and they could benefit. Either they don't have to be the person, they could be the persons running the cruise ships, the smaller cruise ships themselves. And when the COVID first came, that was the first thing I put on Facebook one of the first things was to do, let them go island hopping with a small cruise ship or small yachts. And that could keep the economy going, because the foreigners were still coming in and parking their yachts all over the place. So why not make that a business, right?
I don't know. I might have mentioned it in our last session, but one of the projects that I put together was to create a home port on the eastern side of Arawak Key. And of course, you know what a home port is. The home port is the base where cruise ships leave and come back, and they get their fuel and they get their food and whatever. And I had a meeting with the former administration, and they loved the project, and they say we can do the project, but nothing happened. I had investors who were prepared to invest in the project, because the project was based on the London Finland airport model with an international cruise port and a domestic cruise port for cruise ships that would remain within the boundaries of the Bahamas, going from island to island. And then the international section was for cruise ships that would go outside the Bahamas down to the Caribbean. And what is happening is the mega cruise ships that are now coming online, they are not much longer than the older cruise ships. The older cruise ships that hold 3,000 and 2,000 people, the Port of Miami don't want them, because they now are taking up space. Where a cruise ship that has 16 decks and could hold 6,000 people can be docked there, because they don't pay by the length, they pay by the gross tonnage, and they pay by the number of passengers. So why would you have a small cruise ship that don't have the gross tonnage and have half the passengers? So if we was to build a home port at Arawak Key, which I have the plans for, we could attract these smaller ships. And for example, I believe Carnival they're selling off their smaller ships right now, but I believe they would actually create a Bahamian company and put those ships into that company, because the ships are already flagged in the Bahamas, and as a result, those companies would be Bahamian companies, and then if you don't have no taxes, then they don't have to meet all the rigid environmental standards that the United States now. So what that would do for us, that would create a local cruise ship market, a model that no other country in the Western Hemisphere could copy, because they don't have 20 such islands like we do.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Why? See, Happy, I see you all the time again, but it's interesting
We
listening to
got plenty
you.
time, man.
Yeah, it's interesting, Monty, listening to you, because if we took even, like as you said, 1 billion of the 7 billion that's supposedly out there, and invested in these, what I call these pillars: transportation, energy, natural resources, and telecommunication. I think we have a way of really turning the country around and creating sustainable growth and development for future generations.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, so as Mike was saying, as we start to wrap down, then Monty, if you could give us an overview of what you would like us to leave in the public domain at this point in time. We've had a good number of information that you put on the table. It's good food for thought to continue. We can continue this conversation on our Facebook page, Blueprint for Change show. We have the show on Mondays, but we really would like for us to continue these conversations so that we could develop some sustainable programs that could be put to use and governments could buy into and the like, and increase our quality of life, which is what the new built environment is about. So, Monty?
Well, what we need to do, like I say, we need to look at restructuring. It's time to restructure the country geopolitically. And when I talk about these zones will also be properly represented with local government. Right. And also, I don't know if you remember the old days when the districts were called the South, and then you had a senior MP and a junior MP in the same district. Yeah. And so that might be the model that we look at, that when we create these districts, you have a junior MP and a senior MP. The senior MP would deal with the national level, and the junior MP would be the go-between between the district government and the central government. And then that's where you would get, and then you would create competition, because one region ain't gonna let the next region do better than the other one. We run out of time, but you know, I believe that's the key to restructure physically, and then politically the rest could be applied, and that's what we need to do. We don't need to go to no republic or so forth and so on. We could basically keep the same system and retool it to the benefit of the Bahamas as a unique archipelagic nation.
Yes. So very.
You couldn't have said it better than that, Happy.
No, I agree. And you know, we to me the key of all of that is that the powers to be, whether they are in government or private sector, because when we build in a house, a lot of time we skip the engineer. We want to go to the contractor and let the contractor do the architect, the engineering, and everything else too. We like shortcuts. So, but if you can highlight for us, Mike, anything you want to put on the table before we go?
Sure, man. I think I really want to thank Monty for continuing this conversation. I think he has some brilliant ideas and some ideas that are actually workable. So I think if we could do what we can as Blueprint to, you know, facilitate the development of these ideas, I think that's what one of our mandates needs to be, Happy. So yeah, yes. Man, let's do it.
Great.
Well, I'm open.
Yes,
we can make it happen. Someone have to, you know, and you know, put the plan on the table, and you never know, the doors might open up, you know.
Yes, we work on that too. So it's been very delightful to have you again, Monty, to come back and finish off the conversation that we had. Like I say, you can never finish a conversation like this, but we will continue it on Facebook, and we invite our audience to join us on the Blueprint for Change show on Facebook to expand and give your comments and questions and be a part of the movement to create the new built environment. So on behalf of Michael Diggiss and the team at Blueprint for Change, Monte, we'd like thank you for being on the show and sharing with us. And we will embrace all of these things that you put on the table and find and keep driving. And it might happen in our time or it might happen in our children's time, but we're going to keep growing forward. So as we go to our merry ways, we ask our public to stay home as much as possible. Only go out when you have to go out. Absolutely need to practice some physical distancing. Make sure that we continue to wear our masks according to the protocols of wearing masks. Don't wear your same mask for a week and then don't expect to get sick, because that will cause you to get sick. So wash your hands often and also your face. And then we also like to say to love digitally. We want you to love digitally and love in abundance. So with that, you have been listening to Blueprint for Change, the show designed for your perspective, to change your perspective on how you think of national issues facing the Bahamas. With that, good night, everybody. Enjoy your week.
Good night.
Night.
Blueprint for Change is a collaboration between Michael Diggiss and Associates and Dom Dev Enterprises Limited.